well know, what we're going to be talking about tonight is the economic needs assessment study for the new prison. And we have Mr. Tom Crabtree of Crabtree Roball that will be making the presentation. Now, because we have a number of people, our standard procedure is to, during the presentation, if you have any questions, Nicole here will have cards and pens. If you want to ask a question, just kind of get her attention. She'll be around to provide writing material and writing instruments so you can ask questions. And then after the presentation, we will read as many of those questions as we can and try to answer your questions. We also have here our very distinguished panel, and they will be available to answer questions also that may relate to their particular field of expertise. And I'm going to ask each of them to state their name and a little bit about themselves so you know who they are.
My name is Jim Killinger. I'm a retired state policeman, and I'm also the architectural team leader. And I just want to let you know about two things. The kitchen is open back here. The menu is on the wall. You can get up anytime during the meeting and get something to eat. The bar will be open at 8 o'clock if you want to go back there and get something to drink. I'm also a district deputy of the American Legion. I don't belong to this post, but I lease the post for tonight. And by me leasing it, you're able to go out there and get yourself some drinks after 8 o'clock, if you so desire. My job with this panel was to find a site for a prison and interview some architects, which I did over the last year. Sean?
Hi, my name is Sean Lally. I'm the Fayette County Controller as well as the financial team leader. My role in this project is to finance it at the lowest possible interest rate that I can.
Oh, sure.
My name is Sean Lally, the Fayette County Controller, financial team leader. My job with this panel is to find financing sources for the prison if we choose to build it, if that is the Commissioner's decision.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. My name is Jim Custer. I'm a Deputy Sheriff with the Fayette County Sheriff's Office, and I'm an assistant with the architectural team.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chaplain Terry Sanders with the Fayette County Prison, and myself and Lisa Ferris, who will not be able to be here tonight, we co-chair the mental health side along with the housing and reentry portion for those leaving our prison system.
Good evening. I'm the warden at the Fayette County Prison.
Hi, I'm Tammy Lambie. I'm Deputy Court Administrator, and I have overseen the judicial team.
Steve Luskin and I'm here at the request of our president, Judge John Wagner. I am not on the prison team or the architectural committee, but primarily just here to answer any questions about the interface between the prison and the courts. Obviously, as a member of the court, we need to have the tools that we need to do our jobs, and one of the tools that we have is incarceration. And if we want to use that tool, we have to have the availability of that. I don't do demographic studies and don't determine how many spaces we're going to need now or in 5 years or 10 years, and certainly don't do architecture. But just from my own experience, obviously we need to do something sometime soon, because we've been talking about it for 10 or 12 years, and it's still very tight. We're always asked to do something to find space in the prison. So I'm not here as part of the committee. I'm just here to answer questions, but obviously from the court standpoint, we do need to have the tools in order to do the job that we're elected to do.
Thank you. In addition, I guess I failed to mention that my name is Al Ambrosini. I'm I'm a county commissioner. We have my colleague here, Commissioner Vince Avatoski, as well. And just wanted to point out that this project was started approximately a year ago. So we're to the point now where we can actually start. We have enough information. We know the path forward, and we're going to talk about specifically, the economic needs assessment study that will point out the inefficiencies that we are right now, and how by building a new facility, we'll review all the options to point out the difference between doing nothing, basically, as we have been doing, adding on to the existing facility, or building a brand new facility. I think it's going to be, I think you're going to be amazed at the difference in economics, and it's going to be, I believe, pretty clear as to where we need to go. And so without further delay, we'll let Mr. Tom Crabtree start the presentation.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me without a mic? I'll try to speak up. My name is Tom Crabtree. I'm president of Crabtree Roarbon Associates. I'm an architect and a correctional planner. With me tonight is Rob Slater, Slater Engineering, a local firm that we have teamed with to do this feasibility analysis, this facility needs assessment and feasibility study. So the assessment has several parts. I'll take you through every part. It kind of plods along. It's a lot of information, but at the end of the day, I think it's everything that you need to consider to determine what the best course of action is. You're not unusual. We get called to evaluate counties with prison overcrowding problems pretty often. We've done it about 40 or 50 times in Pennsylvania, sometimes 15, 20 years later for the same county again. So you're not unique, you're not unusual. You have an old jail, it served you pretty well, and unfortunately at this time you're very overcrowded. So the commissioners contacted us and Rob to ask us to tell you what's the best course of action. No one gave us any marching orders on what they wanted the end result of our report to be. I would never accept those orders. Okay, we're here to tell you what we have learned about your system, about your process, what your needs are, and what the options are available to solve those needs. And then you can draw your own conclusions as to what the best option is. The process that we go through involves preparation of, and this is more of a prompter to me. I'll say what I hope explains some of the small print, and some of the documents will be easier to read. But the process we go through, we prepare prison population projections. We use your past data, historic data, to prepare population projections. We determine the current and long-term 5, 10, and 20-year needs of the county in terms of the number of beds that you're going to need for your correctional facility. We establish program requirements. If you need 300 beds, what else do you need besides the beds? You need kitchens, you need medical facilities, all of those things. All of those things add up to create the building program or the program requirements, even if you're going to renovate and not build anything, or even if your decision is to continue to board inmates, there are program requirements to support the increased number of inmates you have to be able to do that successfully. Whoops. We will develop options to show you how to meet those needs. We will prepare construction cost estimates. We will review those with you tonight for each option. We will prepare operating cost estimates for each option. So you'll see what the operating cost differences are, and those are very important. We will compare the life cycle costs and give you the information you need to come to conclusion and make a decision. To do that, we began with program interviews. We then did a field analysis of your prison. We've toured it. We've done drawings of it. We know what your prison is like. We've done code analysis. We've done operating procedure review. We've reviewed how you operate your procedures, your facility, so we understand how you operate, what you need in order to operate. We've done statistical analysis, not just of your inmate population, but of your arrests and your incarceration rates per arrest, so that we understand whether there are any things that we think you might be able to do to reduce your prison population within your correctional or within your judicial system. So once in a while we'll find a county that's arresting a lot of people and throwing them in jail for non-payment of child support. Well, some people might say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody can pay child support when they're in jail. Is there an alternative to that? And we look for those kinds of problems or trends or issues to at least address them so that you're aware of them and can say, okay, these are things that we can do. We review the changes that you're implementing in your system right now. You are adding a day reporting system. You're doing mental health programs to try to reduce your jail population and to, more importantly, to try to reduce the return, the recidivism, the return of inmates back to your jail after you release them. We've reviewed the Pennsylvania statutory requirements, the laws that govern your operation of your jail and the facilities that you need. And we've reviewed the American Correctional Association standards for adult detention facilities, which sort of sets a constitutional standard for you on what your jail should be like, what programs and services and facilities do you need? How many showers per inmate should you have? How many lavatories per inmate should you have in a facility? It's those kind of basic kind of sanitation guidelines that are published by the American Correctional Association. Your existing conditions. First, we determine what the rated capacity of your facility is. That is, using current standards, current requirements, what should the bed count in your prison be? And it should be 239. You have done things over the last few years to increase the number of beds in your facility to 262. What did you do? You put bunks in the hallways, you put bunks in areas that weren't designed to have bunks. The chaplain lost his chapel that's full of bunks. You've got one room left in the building for everything that isn't involved in housing or medical or food service. You have basically no support space in your prison. The problem that you have of overcrowding has kind of come to a head and has kind of become the topic of a lot of conversation because it's now costing you a lot of money. You're currently falling 110 beds short of the number of beds that you have for the average daily population in July. Last July, for the entire month of July, you had 110 more inmates than you had beds to put them in. The ways that you deal with that, you've got a couple of things you do. Sometimes you keep an inmate in the intake area all day long and overnight until you can post bail and get him out of the jail. That's not too bad, we can deal with that. But the other thing that you're doing is you're sending inmates to, at this point, 5 or 6 other counties. And that's expensive. It's costing you $60 per bed per day for every inmate you send somewhere else. In addition to that cost, you have staffing requirements to move those inmates around, to play musical chairs with those inmates. When you've got 60 or 80 inmates spread around the state as far away as State College, then you've got people that need to move them around, and you can't put one guy in a vehicle with one inmate. You got to put usually 2 officers in the vehicle for security reasons, because obviously the inmate could act out and create a problem for you. The rated capacity, that is the capacity you should be operating at, falls 133 beds short of the average daily population in July. So that's the problem. You got more inmates than you have beds. You added the number of beds, which reduced the number of other spaces that you have, which created violations with the law. with regard to the programs and services and policies you're able to implement and follow in the jail. Okay? And of course, you also have a very old jail, which doesn't concern me, but at the end of the day, it becomes a factor in the cost of operation. The existing jail, located here, next to the original courthouse, the beautiful courthouse, and the county building here. There's a boiler building here. This is the annex, which is basically a metal building, a butler building kind of structure that houses another 80 beds. It houses 80 of the 262 beds that you have. So you have 182 beds over here and 80 of them over here. This was designed for 70, so this is now overcrowded. You've added bunks in there. You don't have enough showers. You don't have enough toilet facilities in there for the beds that you have. These are drawings of the existing building that we prepared just to be able to understand how big it is, what the space configuration is, what the square footages are. Some of the standards that we apply are basic standards of square footage per bed. Okay, if you have 50 inmates, you can't put them in a 10 by 10 room. You've got to have adequate space in there for basic health and sanitation and safety. So some of the standards that we're looking at deal with the sizes of the spaces that you have, and that's how we come to that rated capacity, that slightly lower number of 239, I believe. The building condition, the facility was constructed in 1889. It has not had a major renovation since 1962. There was some kitchen work done sometime later than that, but 1889 is the original date. Most of the systems in the building, the electrical systems, the lighting, the heating systems, the plumbing, are either original to the original jail or original to the 1962 renovation. So what you've got is a jail where all the systems in it are 50 years old. You did replace the boiler in the central boiler plant that's remote from the jail and also serves the courthouse. But other than that, the heating system, the air conditioning system, and if you read the Department of Corrections inspection report, they comment on the temperature in the building is not adequate, it's too cold in the winter, there are space heaters that get put around, there are problems associated with the mechanical systems. So those are the systems, the current issues that you have. The systems are beyond life expectancy. 50 years is sort of the maximum life expectancy of any of those systems I just described. The electrical, the plumbing, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, all of those systems. Basic building egress is not ADA compliant. It's also not life safety or building code compliant. So you've got narrow hallways that are twisting and winding through the building. They're not adequate in width. They don't conform with ADA requirements. You are exposed to a potential lawsuit by someone who wants to enter the jail that has a disability because essentially it's not accessible in many areas to a disabled individual, to a disabled member of the public, to a disabled staff member who might seek employment. Food service facilities are not adequate. The kitchen here is 4 or 5 times larger than the kitchen in this jail. The kitchen in this jail looks like a larger version of your kitchen at home, and they're preparing hundreds of meals every day. Administrative support space is not adequate. Public areas and visiting facilities are not adequate. Staff support space is not adequate. Medical facilities are way beyond deficient. If you get an inmate in here with a highly communicable disease, which happens in the prison world, okay, you get inmates with tuberculosis, virulent forms of tuberculosis. You have no way to deal with that individual. You have no place to put them. You have a big problem. You're putting your staff and the rest of the inmates at risk when that happens. Inmate program and support space is non-existent. One room, about the size of that stage, maybe a little bigger than that stage, is the only place in this building anybody can do anything other than be in their cell or be in the day room immediately outside their cell. Intake facilities are substandard. Indoor and outdoor exercise facilities are not adequate. You're cited by the Department of Corrections for not providing the adequate quantity of hours of outdoor exercise and fresh air that the law requires. Okay, the reason that you don't do it is you don't have enough space to do it. It's impossible physically to move the inmates through the jail in a way that you could do it. Inmate housing areas are overcrowded and substandards. There are no work release facilities. This is the only county in Pennsylvania that I've worked in that does not have a work release program. So if you do get that guy that's in jail for child support, you don't have the ability for him to go back to his job and serve his sentence at the same time and pay his child support. Building storage and maintenance facilities are not adequate. So you've got a lot of issues in the building relating to the general condition of the building. In addition, the annex has some problems, mostly ADA access, but security is a problem there. It was built as the most minimum secure facility, and unfortunately, because of your overcrowding, you are having to place inmates in that minimum security environment that are not suitable to that minimum security environment. So you're placing inmates, originally the idea was this was going to be sentenced inmates that are here for a short time and they're going back out on the streets. Now you're having to put other inmates in there, and that's a security problem. In summary, the Fayette County Prison has outlived its useful life. Renovation is impractical, but we're going to study whether it can be done. And the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, Office of County Inspections and Services, has determined that the facility is non-compliant in 80 of the 142 required compliance points. And you can refer to the standards that are attached to our report. To understand what your options are, the first option is if we don't build anything new and we find a good place that we work a deal with some nearby county where we can board all of our inmates and it's cheaper to do that, then why not do that? However, if that's your decision, you still need to upgrade your existing facility to be code compliant. Right now you are not compliant with basic building and sanitation and safety requirements in your existing jail. The cost of upgrading your systems, doing the renovations and repairs to the old building without building any new space is about $7 million. The cost of doing the renovations and security upgrades that are needed at the annex is about $300,000. So if you do those, you can continue to expect to operate your jail with about 239 inmates and be within the law and be compliant, but you will be falling substantially short of the number of beds you need to handle your population. Simple enough, let's call other counties and board them someplace else and we'll limit our costs to $7 million and everybody will be happy. The problem with that concept is, in July alone, you spent $150,000 boarding inmates in other facilities, and that's just the fee that you're paying that other county. That does not include your cost of bringing that inmate into the system, doing the record keeping, doing the processing, doing his medical workup, doing all of the things that you need to do to bring someone into the correctional system, and then transporting them and getting them through the judicial system. Ideally, you would only be sending sentenced inmates to other counties, but I'm not sure that's able to be done at this point. But that's your first choice, would be to send sentenced inmates to minimize the transports. But once you do all of those things, you still got to transport them and pay the staff to move them around. And at the end of the day, in addition to all of those costs that you've already incurred, you're spending $60 a day to watch somebody else watch your processed and sentenced inmate watch TV. So it sounds crazy, but that's the cost of doing that. So that's the existing situation. You're overcrowded. It's going to cost something to upgrade your building, $7 million to upgrade your building to be code compliant. Now we need to know how many beds you need in the future. because this is just today. This is just how many inmates you had last July for the whole month of July. We have monthly population data beginning in 2003. We normally go back 10 years, and that's what we've done here. Beginning in 2003. And you can see there's different columns. There's the Fayette County Prison average daily population, and then there's out of county and total inmates. Back in 2003, you weren't boarding anybody out of county. 2004, same thing. And your population then was, for the whole year, was 269 beds in 2004. In 2004, you had the month of October, is it October? Yeah, month of October, where your average daily population was 303. So this is not a new problem, but what's happened is you've got so many more inmates now that you are having to react to it by sending them somewhere else. 2006, 2007, 2008, you start to board inmates. You're averaging 3 beds a day out in 2008, 2009, less than 2, 2010, you're starting to creep up there, 27 inmates, 2011, 15, 36, and in 2013, for the entire year last year, you averaged 50 inmates somewhere else. And that does not include, by the way, these numbers, all these numbers I'm giving you are average daily population. They do not take into account the peak populations that you get. Now, when you have a drug bust and you arrest 25 people at the same time, you can't say to the law enforcement officials, we don't have any room today, bring them back tomorrow when we've got some space for you. Okay, so what we've highlighted here is the peaks. Whoops. And in the number that I was using earlier, the 372 is the peak in July. 349 was the peak a year ago. 341 was the peak 2 years ago. Okay, there's a steady, slow creeping up of that peak and of that average daily population. Your population has actually grown more slowly than the statewide averages. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of potential to slow down the growth in your population. You're already growing more slowly than all of the rest of Pennsylvania, than the average of the rest of Pennsylvania. But we do look at some statistical information that tells us a few things about your population. Number one, this green column is your DUI arrests. You have a lot of DUI arrests. That impacts your jail population, not too much, but some. And the judge spoke up at the last meeting, and I'll let him talk to this again. It doesn't seem to have much impact on your sentence side, and you're doing a pretty good job, I think, of processing those individuals through the system and getting them into an alternative program as quickly as possible. But they do hit your jail. Okay, they hit the intake area at least. And when they hit the intake area, it's a problem of overcrowding. But we wanted to know whether that is out of line with other counties. You're above average in DUI arrests per 100,000 population, comparing yourself to your neighboring counties and comparing yourself to the other fourth-class counties in Pennsylvania. You're not the highest. Monroe County is the highest, but you're comparable to Franklin County and Washington County is another one that's up there, but there are counties that are lower than you in DUI. Another thing, and this is partly DUI, but actually driven much more by other kinds of arrests, Fayette County has more arrests per 100,000 general population than any surrounding or fourth-class county except Monroe County. Okay? You have a lot of arrests. Why do you have a lot of arrests? I think the law enforcement officials would say they're doing their job. You have a lot of criminal activity. People would say, well, it's not serious stuff. You know, it's possession of marijuana. Actually, if you look at your statistics, you had 22 forcible rapes last year. People were arrested, 22 people were arrested for forcible rapes. You had a lot of robbery, a lot of theft, a lot of aggravated assault. A lot of the things that people get arrested for are going on in this county. Probably driven by economic issues and by a lot of socioeconomic issues. And you should do things to try to change that. But in the meantime, you have a problem that you have to address today. Fayette County incarceration rate is above average for all fourth-class counties, but below the average of all Pennsylvania counties. So you have a high incarceration rate compared to other fourth-class counties, but compared to overall Pennsylvania counties, you're about average. Fayette County's incarceration rate per arrest, and this is very significant. The number of people you have in jail compared to the number of people that you arrest is below the average of all of your neighboring counties and all of the fourth-class counties. So in terms of the yellow column, incarceration per arrest, the average is 6.9 people per, let's see, that would be per 1,000 in jail, or per 100 in jail. So you have fewer people in jail for each arrest than the average of fourth-class counties or neighboring counties. What does that tell us? That tells us that you have a good program of trying to get people out of your jail, which is, in the world of studying jails, a good thing. Okay, in my world of telling people what they need to do to solve their jail problem, if I find somebody that's holding a lot of people in jail per arrest, you're outside of the mainstream of your community and of your neighbors, so you may look at your system to see if it's going too slowly, if you're having trouble with people that qualify for bail making bail. You know, those are things you can look at. In your case, you're processing more quickly and moving people through your system more quickly than your neighbors and other fourth-class counties. Now that we've looked at your trends, and frankly we've determined that there is nothing that we can see that we can use to say, well, we can temper your growth rate, we don't think it's going to continue to grow. We've looked at 10 years of growth, and it's been steady. Here it is. This is the last 10 years. You've grown, your jail population has grown 26.05% over the last 10 years. Your female population has increased from about a little over 10% of your population to over 13% of your population. And I've learned through this process that you also have females that are being sent to state prison that should be being sentenced to county jails. Okay, so your female population is growing faster than your male population. That's pretty normal, but it helps us understand what you're going to need. You're peaking, your average peaks are above 10% of your annual average daily population. So every year you have at least a month where you are over 10% of your average daily population. So when we're projecting how many beds you need, and we're using average daily population to project that, we need to say, well, you're going to have peaks in there, and we better have those beds available because we can't send them home. You also have a diversity issue, okay? You can't put high security women in a minimum security men's bed, okay? It doesn't work. You can't put youthful offenders in with the hardcore adult offenders. So you have to have room in each of the security classifications. That's what we call a peaking factor, and jail planners use that. So that means if you have a need for 400 beds as your average daily population, we need to increase that by those peaks to be sure that you have the kind of space and the quantity of space you need. Over the last 10 years, your population has increased 2.61% per year. That's good. That's the statewide average is 4.8% over the last 20 years. So 4.8% a year for the last 20 years is a statewide. Yours is below the statewide average. Your last 5 years is almost exactly at the state average of 4.8%. So 10 years ago, you were increasing more slowly. Something has happened within the crime profile in the county, that your growth rate has increased over the last 5 years to 4.8% a year. But you are doing some things. You're implementing day reporting. You are working in your mental health with mental health issues. You are doing, and you've got electronic monitoring, home monitoring. You've got bracelets that you utilize. That we can see ways that we can say, okay, maybe they can get back to that lower rate of increase of 2.6% or 6%. So our recommendation is, rather than go with the higher projection that would yield more beds of 4.8%, we're recommending that we project out at 2.6%, which, remember, you had 372 inmates in all of July. We're saying your average daily population 10 years from now is going to be 406 inmates. At the rate of increases that you've been having, that's pretty believable. In fact, I think that we're at risk of underestimating your growth, but at the same time, we're giving the prison board and the county commissioners strong warnings that if you don't continue to implement the programs that you're doing, that your population will grow at that faster rate. So statistically, this is the lowest growth rate that we can project and still be statistically correct. When you take that 406 and you add the peaking factor and the diversity factor, you get to a need for 480 beds. That's how many actual places you need in your jail. They would ideally never all be full at the same time, because it wouldn't give you any room for the guy that's coming in tomorrow, but you need that many beds to manage your population properly. To house those beds, you need a bunch of things. You need public spaces, you need visiting facilities, you need medical facilities and kitchens and food service, and they all need to be of an adequate size to prepare 1,500 meals a day, for example. That's a lot of meals. They all need to be of an adequate size to provide the programs and services that the Department of Corrections requires you to provide. And that's what this list is. This is all of the things that you need in your jail in the way of space. A booking center, pretrial services unit, inmate property storage, volunteer and religious program space, library. You're required by law to have a library. I don't know where your library is, your law library. I don't know where it is. If it's in there, it's in a corner somewhere. But, you know, this is a serious requirement. Food service, medical facilities, and so on and so forth. And finally, you get to the housing, and you need multiple housing units of a configuration that will allow you to separate inmates of different security classifications and separate men from women and do all the things that you should do. With all of that, you need 98,400 square feet of space. Your existing jail is a little over 31,000 square feet. Okay, so you have about a third of the square footage you need in your existing jail, if it was properly configured, which it's not. But we could theoretically use that 31,000 square feet for other things and house your inmates in new construction, which is one of the options. So the summary of options. What do we have available to us to solve this problem? We know what the need is. We know what the problem is. How can we solve it? The options that we've evaluated, and we've evaluated sub-options within this, but the options are option 0, no new construction. No new construction. Just renovate that existing facility and find space somewhere nearby that we can house our inmates. And if you could do that and house them at a lower cost, my recommendation would be to do that. There are community issues, visitation issues that come up when you start doing that, but if you could find the right location close by, it's an option. We've recommended that option to other counties. Okay, you can check with Union County, Pennsylvania, and you can see that our recommendation to them was to board their inmates in Snyder County. Option 1, construct additions and renovations. This means we take your existing facility, we utilize the space as best we can, and we add what you need to provide the space you need. And option 2 is to construct an all-new facility on a site to be determined. At the time, I know the committee was or the advisory group was searching out sites the whole time we were working, but at the end of the day, we did not, at this time, determine what the site would be. This is a concept drawing. Of course, option 0, it only involves renovation of the existing building, so we've shown you the layout of the old building, and it would remain pretty much in that same configuration. Option 1 adds space here for housing and adds space to the rear of, this is the existing jail, space to the rear of the existing jail for support spaces, and adds space in this area for visiting and the other public functions that need to occur. And as you go up, this option would be 3 floors of 2 tiers, so 6 levels of construction. So it would be comparable in height to the county building next door to the courthouse. And this is just a concept drawing. What's significant about this is it tells us what fits on the site in terms of, let's go back to that site drawing. You know, we're right up against the limits of the site here, getting around to this parking area. We would have to build a parking structure to replace the cars that we're replacing here unless you've got surface parking somewhere else. We retain the annex as an alternative use. And in this configuration, you get housing units that are, I think they are 48 beds on each side. So you have 48 beds on each side. So you have this staff station and a 48-bed housing unit. And the reason that this becomes important, this is not really a design, this is more of a concept drawing. The reason this becomes important is we have to understand, for operating cost purposes, how you would staff this facility. Okay, how many housing units would you have to have in order to staff the facility properly? A housing unit with 80 beds can be staffed with about the same staff as a housing unit with 60 beds. So if you have more smaller housing units, you end up with less efficiency in your staffing. Okay, so that's what that concept would look like, and this is the concept of a hypothetical 13-acre site with the potential for future additions, and 2 housing pods here. Each of these is 80 beds, and these are minimum security beds, and female minimum security and high security beds. So now, instead of 48-bed units, we have 80-bed units that can be staffed with about the same staffing, so more efficient operationally. And that becomes important when you're analyzing the operating costs. And of course, all those other facilities that you need are here. What you can see is you need a lot of other facilities, but the blue, the housing areas, is far and away the most square footage of any new facility. And this is a 2-tiered arrangement, 1 story, and you can see the staff stations for the security staff. This is a capacity analysis. This simply reiterates that the capacity of the old jail, when you renovate it, is 239 beds. The capacity of option 1 is 480 beds, and the capacity of option 2 is 480 beds. So option 1 falls short of meeting your projected bed requirements. Option 0 falls short of meeting your bed requirements. Option 1 and option 2 meets the requirements. Now we do a staffing analysis. Why do we do a staffing analysis? Because staffing will be over 60, as high as 70% of your operating costs going forward. So staffing is everything. 1 staff post. This is your staff information. This is your relief factor. When you take the vacations and sick leave and holidays and number of hours that a worker can work in a shift, 40 hours a week, what you determine based on your actual collective bargaining agreement is that it takes 5 people to staff a single post, a post would be 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So every day requires 5. To staff a post that is a one-shift post, let's say we have a post that drops off at night when the inmates are in their cells, takes 1.67 staff. So now we determine what the staff would be required to operate your facility at 406 beds. So this is what it would take to operate 10 years from now. How many staff would it take to operate when you achieve that 406 bed count? And in your existing, the first thing we're showing you is your existing staffing up here. Existing staffing today, your facility, in your budget this year, you provided for 60 full-time equivalent staff. You have part-timers, 2 part-timers that work 20 hours become a full-time equivalent. So your budget supports 60 full-time staff. In response to the overcrowding, you've had to have your experienced correctional officers transporting inmates, and you've had to replace them with less experienced, and therefore you have had to add staff to meet the needs of the increased transport that's going on. Okay? But your budget supported 60 staff. Option 0, all I have done is add the transport staff here that it would take to move those 406 inmates around, and I've added 1 records lieutenant because when you get to that number, you're going to need more paperwork to process those inmates, and that brings you to 84.72. So if you do not add any beds anywhere, it will take 84.72 staff to operate your jail and transport the 406 inmates, the extra inmates in that 406 to wherever they need to go. Option 1, because of the smaller housing units and the inefficiencies, actually takes more staff than that, 90.27. So option 1, and from a staffing standpoint, is probably not a good idea. Option 2 takes 71.9. So the difference between option 2 and option 0 is only 7 full-time employees. Okay? Not too many more to just maintain the status quo. Of course, the problem is you're also paying somebody else to watch the inmate. So you're paying for more staff, but you're also paying somebody else to watch the inmate. I also did an analysis of what would happen in the first year of operation of option 2, just because I wanted to be able to compare that. It would be slightly fewer because there would be a male housing unit that you wouldn't be required to open yet. We're building for a 10-year growth. Initially, you'd be able to operate with a minimum security housing unit, or you could board out inmates to other counties, or bring in inmates from other counties. But it would take fewer people to operate your jail in the first year of operation, but not significantly fewer. We then take that information on staffing, and this is a spreadsheet. This is your 2013 operating budget. This is a line item budget. You have salaries and health care benefits and food and medical costs and all of the different line items in your budget that build your $5.8 million budget for 2013. We take those line items and we pull them apart and we say, well, food's costing you $1,125 an inmate. So we know what your food costs are. And the food costs are driven by how many inmates you have. Therefore, it's driven by average daily population. Salaries, staff costs are driven by how many staff you have. Other costs are driven by how big the building is. Heating costs are driven by how many square feet the building is. So we create all of those relationships between those variables, and we plug the variables in up here, and it tells us what your operating cost is going to be for each of these scenarios. First thing I did was projected what your operating costs going to look like next year if you are boarding 110 inmates somewhere else. And if you're boarding 110 inmates somewhere else, your operating budget's going to have $2,400,000 in boarding costs, and your budget, instead of being $5.8 million or $5.6 million next year, is going to be closer to $8.4 million. So you're facing a big increase in operating costs. You've already spent, Sean, is it $1 million yet?
It's $967,000.
You've already spent $967,000 this year just on the boarding of the inmates, just paying other counties. So it's pretty easy to believe that that number is going up, and that number is going to be more than $1 million next year. And if it's 110 inmates, it's going to be $2.4 million. In the first year, in the 10th year, the first year of operation of option 0, that number will increase to over $10 million. Your operating budget for your jail will increase to over $10 million because when you have that many inmates, you're going to be spending over $3 million a year in boarding costs. Option 1 has a projected operating budget of $7.7 million, more than your budget today, less than what your budget next year is shaping up to be, unless your population declines, but still a big number. Option 2 in the 10th year is projected to have an operating budget of $6.4 million. Why are those numbers lower? We're not paying somebody else to house our inmates, and we don't have to pay to have them transported. Those are the two differences in those numbers. It's the staffing requirement of transport and the cost of boarding. All the other costs are being driven by how many inmates you have, what's your cost of health care per inmate, what's your cost of staff per correctional officer, all of those things. I did want to understand what the first year of operation might look like of option 2, and that number is $6.2 million. Slightly less than the 10th year of operation. I want to point out all costs are expressed in today's dollars. So inflation is going to make the difference between these operating costs grow. Okay, as inflation goes up, the cost per bed used to be $45 to board somebody somewhere else. Not too many years ago, you were paying $45. Now you're paying $60. Okay, so inflation affects all of these numbers, and it increases the spread between the options. The projected operating budget for the next 12 months is option 2 is of option 0 is $1,911,000 higher than the projected operating budget for option 2 in the first year of operation. If you have fewer inmates than that, that number will go down, but it isn't going to be 0. And based on this year, it's going to be well over $1 million. And based on your average daily population, it is going to be 1,911,000. In 10 years, that gap grows to 4,271,000. Now that's just the operating side. We still have potential construction or non-construction to deal with and evaluate. Option 0, I already went through this, $7.4 million to renovate your jail to make it constitutionally adequate, compliant with code, compliant with Department of Correction requirements, compliant with American Correctional Association requirements, compliant with basic health, life safety standards. Option 1, the renovation option costs $34 to $40 million. Additions and renovations, a lot of money, big number. These numbers include soft cost, contingency, inspection and contesting, everything, not just construction dollars, but all the other costs associated, with the exception of financing costs. Option 2, $27 to $31 million, all-inclusive cost to develop the new facility. So now we've got our operating costs tied down, and we have our construction costs tied down. We need to understand what's the debt service on that construction for each option. The debt service for option 0 is $561,000 a year to do that $8.6 million renovation. It's $2.6 million for the $41 million additions and renovations, and it's $2 million, just over $2 million for the $31 million option 2. Those numbers for an average daily population of 406, they boil down to a cost per bed per day, because that's what it's all about. What's the cost per bed per day to operate your jail? So option 0, the debt service load, the debt service load of option 0 is $3.80 per bed per day for 30 years. The debt service load for option 1 is $18.03 per bed per day for 30 years. And the option 2 is $13.97 per bed per day. So now we got a per diem on the debt service. We want to add that to the operating cost per diem, which was that big spreadsheet, and you get a total cost per bed per day of option 0 of $76.51. You get a total cost of option 1 of $70.65, and you get a total cost of option 2 of $57.83. What does that mean? When you hit an average daily population of 406 beds, the total cost of your jail, including debt service, for option 0 is going to be $11.3 million a year. The total cost of option 1 is going to be $10.4 million a year, and the total cost of option 2 is going to be $8.347 million a year. That's 10 years out, and that's the projected based on 406 average daily population. Now we could say, well, I don't believe those numbers, I'm going to reduce the number to 350. I can't close that gap by reducing the number. I cannot statistically find a way to close that gap significantly, because I truly believe your average daily population is going to be 406 or more in 10 years. The annual cost of option 0 is $2.99 million greater than the total annual cost of option 2. The annual cost of option 1 is $2.109 million greater than the annual cost of option 2. We have to conclude at $3 million a year for 30 years. Option 2 will save the county taxpayers $85 million over the 30-year life of your debt service. That's my presentation. I think we're ready for questions. I didn't get into my credentials. I usually do this. I'm sorry about that, but I mentioned that we've done this. These are the Pennsylvania counties that we have done this. We've also done it for the state of West Virginia. We've also done this process for the state of New Hampshire. The outcome is different in every case. Sometimes we say do nothing. Sometimes we say build new. Sometimes we say, the vast majority of times we say additions and renovations is the best option. In your case, you haven't had any upgrades in your jail in 50 years. Additions and renovations is not a good option.
Okay, thank you, Tom. That was a really good presentation. I know there's a lot of information to digest at one time, but it does show us some of the costs that we're going to see in the future, and it does project that building a new facility facility is the most efficient way cost-wise, not to mention a bunch of other opportunities we have to reduce recidivism in the future. Unless there's any comments from our panelists, we'll start with the question and answer session, if that's okay. The first question is, Kate Kishbaugh's November 2012 inspection shows a 260-bed capacity in the jail, in our current jail facility. That includes our old jail and the annex put together. Why did Mr. Crabtree state 239-bed capacity?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I didn't state a 239-bed capacity. I stated a 239-bed rated capacity. If you comply with basic standards, your capacity would be 239. You do not comply with basic standards, and you have moved bunks in, and I think she said 250. The Department of Corrections official number for how many beds you have in your jail right now is 262. So what I have said is 262 beds, which is how many bunks you've got in that building. And that is 110 beds less than the average daily population in July.
Okay, the next question is, why did Mr. Crabtree only use July 2013 statistics to conclude the study? And they're kind of referring to this as essentially an anomaly.
I didn't use only July 2013 statistics. I used the last 10 years of statistics. But when we are dealing with a peak, I am telling you that your peak in July was 372. Your peak in July of 2012 was 349. Your peak in October of 2011 was 341. 341 is less than 349, and 349 is less than 372. There's a trend. Statistically, you cannot argue that your population has increased over the last 10 years. There will be peaks and valleys in your population, and that shows up in these numbers right here. Every month it goes up or down or up or down or up or down. And you're just like every other county we've ever evaluated. You see that curve. But what you see undeniably is that curve is on a steady upward trend of 2.8% a year for the last 10 years, and a little steeper trend of 4.8% a year for the last 5 years. I have no statistical basis and no anomalies within your correctional system that we've been able to identify that would be able to justify not projecting that we at least expect it to grow at the slower rate, at the 2.8% a year. And your peak next year is likely to be more than July of this year. It's likely to be a few percent more, 10 more inmates. Every year, that's another data point that I didn't mention. Every year, the actual number of inmates in your jail has increased by 8.38. Well, that's pretty consistent with those numbers. And over the last 10 years, it's increased by 15. So if you have a peak next July of 15 more than this July, which is statistically what you'd have to say is going to happen, you're going to have 15 more inmates boarded out next July, and that number's not going to be 110, it's going to be 125. You may have April where it's 70. And you may have, but at the end of the day, that average daily population growth, statewide, is a 20-year trend. Statewide, not, and in every evaluation that I've done, I have never had a county come back to me and said, Mr. Crabtree, we built too much jail, we could have built less.
Thank you. We have, the next question is, why is Fayette County the only county that did not report 2012 jail statistics to the state? So I'm not sure what all the jail statistics we normally report to the state. Could you address that, Gordon?
As far as I know, those statistics were reported to the state commission.
I did not have trouble finding Fayette County statistics in the Uniform Crime Reporting Act, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency data. Your data was as current as any other county.
What will be the cost for the daily transportation cost to be to and from the new prison to the courthouse?
If you look in the cost summary, the operating cost summary, and the staffing analysis for option 2, I included 2 full-time transport staff, so that cost is in fact built into this option. It would be incorrect to not build that in, and I have done that, and there they are. It will take 2.4 employees to fill those 2 positions.
Keep in mind that the new jail facility will have, as Mr. Crabtree already pointed out, will have central booking in the new jail. It will have a magisterial district judge's office and hearing room in the new jail. And it will also have a courtroom in the jail. And so that will reduce the transports from, in the case of a magisterial district judge's hearings, we will no longer, as we are now, transporting inmates from our jail to magisterial district judges' offices around the county. We will have the MDJs go to the prison and have the hearings there. That's a much more secure way to do things, because you're risking, when you're transporting an inmate, you're risking them, escaping, you're risking an accident, and if you hurt an inmate on the road, guess who has to pay for it? The taxpayers. So it's a safer way, it's a much more cost-effective way, and it reduces our transportation costs. Next question is, Mr. Killinger has said the jail was going to be shut down due to 80 violations or so. Weren't most of them policy issues? Have you corrected those issues?
I can respond to that. First of all, those numbers come out of Kate Kishbaugh's inspection in 2004, I believe it was. No, I'm sorry, in November of last year. Now, to be very clear about those points, those 80 points, and this is right out of the law. I want to be very clear about this. Out of the law, which is Title 37, Chapter 95, they specify in black and white, and I have it right here with me, that you have 11 minimum requirements that are mandatory for the safety, security of the county prison, the prison staff, the inmates, and the public. Now, some of those 11 points are definitely policy, and some are not, but they still are required for the county to mandate. We failed 8, I believe, or 9 out of those 11. Is everybody clear on that? It's right in the law. Those sections are in there, and I'm going to read it to you. It relates to personnel, it relates to admission and release, it relates to rules and procedures, Remember that. Rules and procedures, that's policy. Relating to classification, relating to housing, relating to food service, relating to medical and health services, relating to inmate disciplinary actions and procedures, relating to security, relating to treatment services, and lastly, relating to sanitation and security. Those are the 11 points that are mandatory and essential. You violate one of those, they can come and cite you for not complying. They can cite you the second time if you don't comply. They can cite you the third time if you don't comply. And after the third time, you're going to wind up having a hearing with the Department of Corrections. And when you have that hearing with the Department of Corrections, they got two options to give you. The first one is an order that they can issue to the county prison stating that you are now ineligible to receive any additional prisoners. Any additional prisoners. You cannot receive any more. That closes your prison.
Excuse me.
I'm not done.
That's
That closes your prison. And they also order the Court of Common Pleas, which is Judge Leskin sets on, any further inmates, if that is closed, to receive any more, he's got to sentence them, and they're going to order the county, Fayette County, to send them to another prison. That means our prison's closed. You've got to sentence them somewhere else. They've got to be sent to another adjoining prison. Now that is the law. Does everybody understand that? And that's what I'm talking about with those points.
Mr. Ambrosini, I have to amend what he's saying. I spoke myself yesterday with Tom Breshaw, who is the director, the DOC director of the, it's in my question there, you have it, of the county inspection and services office. I spoke myself with him by phone, and he told me that that process is multiple steps.
Yes.
He referred me to the law, the legislation from which you're reading. I read it myself. He sent me an email for the proper links and so on so that I could track it myself. And he told me specifically that the Department of Corrections has never closed down a prison in the state of Pennsylvania, nor do they have the authority to do that. It requires a court order to do that. And if the prison would be cited once, twice, or 3 times, and if you read about the second part of what you read there, where the prison can't receive any more prisoners, there's some stipulation in there about people who are sentenced from 6 months to 5 years, that those, we can't take those prisoners. But then there's also a clause in there that the prison can correct those issues, and then the problem is solved. And I was told, and your Exhibit A under the construction summary, the building condition summary, at the bottom it says refer to Exhibit A or see Exhibit A. It has the list of the 142 deficiencies that they rate the prison on, and the 80 that the Fayette County. Now, please understand, I haven't formed an opinion about whether I want the prison built or not. I'm here to find out what's going on and how it's going to be paid for. Maybe we need it. It sounds like we do. But I'm not clear on some things, and that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm trying to get this information.
There is no question that some of the deficiencies are policy deficiencies.
Yes. What I was told was none of those are structure related. So I went to the exhibit myself and I reviewed them. And from my review, and I'm a technical writer and editor and I've been published in more than 60 countries around the world. So I've done a lot of research and writing and reading of other people's writing. It doesn't make me an expert, but it does make me not a dimwit when I read things. So when I looked at that, it looked to me like the majority of those 80 issues of noncompliance were more towards the policy area that could be corrected, and much less toward the structural areas that would require more of a brick and mortar correction.
Ma'am, let me interject one thought here.
Sure.
Regardless of this study or whatever deficiencies it says that we may or may not have, it does exist, it's factual. Regardless of that, we have spent $964,000 this year in out-of-county rentals.
I understand.
That is truly the
I'm
focus
not-
here.
I'm not
Even
dis-
if we corrected these deficiencies, how would that be relevant?
I don't want to say that your figures are right or wrong, Mr. Lally. I don't like being told that the DOC is going to come in and shut this prison down if we don't do this. And I don't like being faced with a menacing comment by the warden who says that if we don't do this, we're going to get sued in the thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars or the millions of dollars by an inmate at this very moment, potentially. That's an alarming
Are you
statement.
familiar, ma'am, with the PREA Act?
No, I'm not.
Well,
And I don't profess to be an expert about any of
the
this.
PREA Act says that any person arrested under the age of 18, it's called a no sight, no sound. So if they're 16 years old and they're charged with a felony, okay, you know what a felony is. That means there is no sight and no sound. So if they can see an adult or hear an adult, that is a policy. How do you write that policy when we can't house them away from a person that's over the age of 18? It's impossible.
I understand what you're saying.
It's impossible.
But to say that the Department of Corrections could come in tomorrow and shut the prison down based on these
That's
issues.
what I was told by the Department
Well,
of
that's
Corrections.
what I'm saying. I'm just
I
trying
don't
to
know what
correct
they
that
told
point.
you, but I know what they told me.
That's all I'm trying to do is correct that point.
Let's make sure we understand something here, okay? I'm not so concerned about the Department of Corrections, okay?
Okay.
I agree with you. I've never seen them close a county jail. Haven't done it. The Department of Corrections, their mission is to try to figure out a way to help you keep your county jail operating, okay?
Okay.
The Special Services Division of the Department of Corrections, that's their mission.
Yeah, they were very
Okay?
nice.
They want to help.
Yeah, they were
Okay.
very nice.
Part of the way they help is the way they write their citation, okay? Listen to this. This is right out of that report. Terry Sanders is the chaplain and receives a small monthly stipend. He pays for his own insurance. He provides the oversight of religious program. There are clergymen in the community and a variety of volunteers who provide religious programming. The room designated for religious services is very small, and consideration should be given to find a larger area for this treatment purpose. This room is used for all programming and treatment, which is typically run by volunteers. Policy is lean in this area and does not adequately meet Title 37 criteria. Now, that's the politest way that he can write that. Okay, and I can tell you there is no larger room in this building. And he's being polite when he says it's lean. Okay?
I see.
Now, that's the point on the Department of Corrections report. What I really want to make sure you understand is that was the last thing I cited. Okay, that's at the bottom of my report. I made it in red because I didn't want to forget it, because they do have the legal authority to order you not to house inmates in that jail. I've read the law, and at least by my interpretation, now you can get a legal opinion on it, but they certainly have the authority to make life miserable for you. Okay? However, before they would make life miserable for you, there are code violations and public health violations and safety violations and Americans with Disability Act violations and all of these other things that I've pointed out to you that need to be corrected and can be corrected for $7 million.
Thank you
Okay?
for clarifying.
That's what I'm saying. It's not one thing. It's not the Department of Corrections. It's not the ADA. It's not the Department of Health. If the Department of Health came into your kitchen, I'd be very concerned right now. And it's not for lack of effort of the staff. The kitchen is the size of this stage. It's tiny. And they're preparing hundreds of meals a day. The staff at this prison is doing an amazing job of keeping keeping the lid on the place. Okay? And that's my observation. I've inspected and toured county facilities all over Pennsylvania. Okay? And I will say this in the most politically correct way I can, you are at risk. You are at risk of being sued. Okay? That's my message. You can make a decision to manage that risk by doing nothing and putting money away and continuing to board inmates. I'm not telling you what decision to make. I am telling you, it's my duty to tell you, you are at risk. If I didn't tell you that, and someone from the ADA came in, they could sue me. Okay, because I didn't tell you that. So it's the totality of the facility. Every system in that building is worn out. It's 50 years old. The building is inadequately heated. That is in the Department of Corrections comments. Inadequately heated. Okay, so it's not one thing, it's not two things, it's the totality of the situation. And you can remedy that in the existing jail by spending $7.3 million, and out of that renovation, you will get 239 beds.
Okay. I'm just concerned about this kind of alarmist approach sometimes with some of these statements made, that's all.
Well, what you said, ma'am, is exactly correct. And what the Department of Corrections means, if I can interpret them, when they said they could close the prison, as I quoted to you, and it's in the law.
They didn't say they could close the prison.
You said that they told you they wouldn't close it.
You just said they did say they could close the prison.
No, I'm saying that's what they told me, but the interpretation is they can issue an order
Who
not to
told you that?
receive any more prisoners at this facility. And to me, that's closed. You can't get in. You're closed.
I'd like to add something to that, because rather than talking about what somebody said or how they interpreted, there's an email between me and the Department of Corrections, and it's very clear. When I read that DOC annual inspection report and saw the 80 of the 142 deficiencies, I contacted in Mr. Crabtree's report, and he was right to obviously cite it. But that, as he says, totalitarian, but you have to look at, whatever, you have to look at the whole picture, okay? And when I receive telephone calls and messages every day, I don't know what the other two commissioners receive, but I receive them constantly. Oh my God, Angela, is it true that they're going to close down the prison? That you and the other commissioners in your administration has been derelict in your duties, No. And you know what? I have an email from DOC to prove it. We'll put all of this at rest, okay? Not from Kay Kishbaugh, because guess what? November 2012, she was the director. She's not there anymore. But the person in charge, and then this individual named Tom, and I don't know all of the names and everything, but it was very clear. And it said that those deficiencies that we receive on an annual basis, that our warden and the prison board was very well aware of, that we could have corrected them. How do you correct them? You write the policies. And it's not just writing the policy, it's writing it, adopting it, and implementing it. Okay? I'm not finished. When you are done implementing it,
She's trying to speak.
What relevance would that have?
She's speaking. Let her speak. Let her, I know, it doesn't matter, is the issue. Let her finish.
No, I'm going to speak. Okay, I'm a commissioner and I'm going to speak and I'm going to finish it. Because a citizen asked the question, and Mr. Crabtree, rightfully so, cited it, but it needs to be clarified. If you cite it, then it needs to be clarified. And when you have a citizen agricultural team leader or anybody else sitting up there that says, we're going to be closed down, then citizens read that and hear it and ask us. And it's not true. And I have the emails and I provided them it's not true. How do we correct the situation? Okay? DOC provided training to the warden. It is our responsibility as 3 commissioners, him, me, and him, as well as the prison board, to make sure that it's done and taken care of and implemented. When you implement the procedures, then the issue is corrected. Will DOC come in and shut us down? There is no doubt. It's out in my car, and I will give it to anyone. They said they will not. They do not have the authority. Do we need to correct situations? Yes. But don't scare the public into saying that they're going to come in and shut us down, because they're not going to. DOC said it. And don't scare the public into saying that we are ADA non-compliant. Look at the past information that the prison board has received with the inspection reports, and it shows about ADA compliancy. And in that DOC statement, email, it says that there are many jails within Pennsylvania that are not fully ADA compliant. As long as you make the conveniences for the inmate. I'm not saying that we don't need to make some corrections and changes and improvements, but do you need to build a 480-bed facility to do that, or can you make the corrections in other ways? We need to look at all options, but don't throw it out to the public that they're going to come in and close us down because we are non-compliant when they're coming back on November 15th. They're sending me discs, and I'll tell you, I'll give those discs to the warden and his staff, and he better have them done. I hope that he writes them. I hope that anybody else helps him write them. But if they're not written, we will be cited. Will we be cited because of a structural thing? No, we'll be cited because we're not in compliance with Title 37. And yes, it's not just writing a policy, it's implementing. But when you write a policy, you can implement it at the same time. And don't say that they're going to close us down because we're not fully ADA compliant, because the document says that. You, Mr. Crabtree, you can say whatever you can, and you have your credentials. I understand that. We as commissioners have ours, and the judges and everybody else. But who has the authority? It's just the thing of telling the public that they're going to come in and shut us down when it's simply not true.
I have not spoken those words.
I didn't say that you did.
Okay.
But you cited it in your report.
This report does not say that.
But you cited it in your report in red, as you said. And
No, what I said in my report was that you are in violation of 80 of the 159 issues. I didn't say I said you are at risk. And I did not even say that in my report because I felt that was better to say to an executive committee to avoid the potential of some jailhouse lawyer.
You're not saying it, but
picking
others
okay.
who are quoted in the newspaper.
What I'm telling you is my experience is that you are at risk. Okay? What I'm telling you is that we've done 10 facilities in the state of West Virginia where one lawsuit closed every jail in the state.
Where is that documented?
Yeah,
I see Moundsville. I don't see any other prison being shut down.
Those are state facilities. These are the county jails.
I don't see any county jails being shut down.
Well, I'll be happy to get you that information. As a result of that one lawsuit, the state of West Virginia was ordered to establish a regional jail authority and rebuild all of the county jails in West Virginia. And we designed it. Okay? And instead of working for the client, who could make decisions on how much they spent and what they wanted to do, we were essentially working for a court master who didn't care what it cost. That's the worst case scenario. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here tomorrow or the next day, but I have a duty to tell you, you are at risk of that happening. Okay? That's a fact. Okay? And when we talk about all you have to do is write the policy, please tell me how you write a policy that makes a bigger room for the chapel. That can't be, you can't do that by writing a policy. The problem is they're in violation of the policy because they don't have the space to do it.
Right, and I also remember the chaplain, and his programs are very good, and I support all of his programs, especially Genesis. but I can tell you that it was very disturbing to me to hear the chaplain say 3 times publicly that he couldn't hold his AA and NA meetings because he was, quote, bumped out of the room because jail administration staff had to have a meeting. Well, my God, guys, walk across the street and use our commissioner's conference room because we're not using them. Don't not hold an AA and an NA meeting because you're, quote, bumped. And this is nothing, I totally agree, you shouldn't have been bumped. But it's the jail administration staff, don't use the facility. Let them use the facility. Some things can be fixed without, as I said, a $32 million facility. That's all I'm saying. And you're, Mr. Kraft, I understand you're presenting the information. I understand what you're presenting. Right.
Then you got to deal with the overcrowding issue.
I understand what you're presenting, and that's what you were hired to do, and it's up to us 3 to present it to the citizens.
Absolutely agree.
No problem.
Will you give me 10 seconds to thank everybody for answering my question?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What I'd like everybody to do in here, since we're talking about these points in the inspection report, you can go online and you get a copy of chapter 95, it's entitled 37, and read it. Everything I quoted here is right out of the law. Whether you like it or not, it is what it is. And it tells you in that law, one of those 11 can require you to get cited 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. And after the 3rd time, you can request a hearing. You could request a vulnerability. Did you read about the vulnerability issue? Where they can come in and do an inspection to see how vulnerable you are?
Yes, yes, I did.
When we say, again, I'm going to say it for the last time, when we say closing the prison, we're talking about an order saying you can receive no more prisoners. Not closing that one and sending everybody to God knows where. It's saying you cannot receive any more prisoners. You're done.
That's not the final point.
That's in the law. That's in the law. Read it.
That's in the law, but you're stopping before the end of the legislation. That's what I'm saying.
There's a process to go through.
That's right.
But
And
the final one,
not the end.
that's the final process.
No.
You cannot receive any more inmates.
Can I have a couple words, maybe just a couple minutes? We're going over the same territory over again, and I think that this business about 80 out of 142 is a well-taken point, because most of those points in the 142 were directly addressed as policy issues, but as Mr. Crabtree says, some of those policy issues you cannot provide treatment programs that policy requires if you don't have a place to do it. Let me inject a larger issue into this. We as a county that's not as economically successful as some other counties, and I'm speaking as a citizen, as a taxpayer, as a voter, and not as a judge, we are obligated as a county to provide prison services. There's other states where county prisons are state facilities and paid for by the general state taxpayers. Just like schools in other states are paid for generally by the state taxpayers. I don't think it's fair that my kids have less dollars spent on their education per year than students in Upper St. Clair or Mount Lebanon, because that's a wealthy area and we're not a wealthy area. By the same token, we have to squeeze pennies to provide prison facilities. We have to try and rehabilitate people, put them back in the community to where they're not going to commit new crimes, and we have to do it on our own money, not money from the state. Yeah, we get grants and everybody tries to maximize that as much as possible, but we're put in the squeeze that we're in because the state does not take responsibility for it as much as they could. Now, just one concrete example. A county jail sentence cannot exceed a minimum sentence of 11 months, 29 days. As soon as that minimum sentence meets 1 year, then it becomes a state prison sentence. Within the past 2 years, the state sentencing guidelines were changed. The governor, the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing, Crime and Delinquency, they changed guidelines so that instead of the guideline range for a particular offense being 6 months to 12 months, which means it could be a state sentence, they changed it to 6 months to less than 12 months. With the idea being, let's force the counties to take more of these inmates back so that the state doesn't have to pay for it. So part of this issue and part of the controversy in this room, they changed the guidelines so that the range on a minimum sentence is from 6 months to something less than 12 months, with the idea being that more of these inmates will be sentenced to county prisons and fewer will go to state prisons.
When did that change take place?
It's in the 7th edition of the guidelines, and they say bluntly that the reason for it is to force more inmates to stay in the county and not go to state prisons.
When did the change?
I don't know the exact, it's within the last 2 years, the 7th edition of the sentencing guidelines.
Could that account for the higher population that the county jail has been?
Well, please let me finish what I'm talking about. But I'm just saying as a background, one of the things that nobody's talked about is we're all fighting with each other, or people are fighting with each other, and we're going over the same territory again. This 80 out of 142, it's not just policy. If you look at that report that's in Exhibit 8, or page 8, section 8, the first 10 pages of it are just full of examples of inadequate facilities, not just inadequate policies. And I can just quote to you, I just wrote some notes. Visibility into cells is limited due to design. Catwalk does not allow for good visibility. Out of cell time is inadequate because there's no place to go. There's no recreation or program space except the yard, weather permitting. There is no place for inmates to go. State requires them to be out of the cell 2 hours a day. They can't be out of the cell 2 hours a day because there's no place for them to go. Heat and cooling is inadequate. This is all page 4. Some are sleeping on boats on the floor. Release area, admissions release area is small and cramped. Only one officer assigned. There's only one officer assigned because there's only room for one officer. Classification has no time limit because one officer can't classify all the inmates. I had 2 trials this week where I had inmates who were witnesses in the case that are on a range where they're getting threatened by other inmates because there's no place to put them where they are safe from those kinds of threats. Again, pointing fingers in this room isn't going to solve those problems. This is the 5th of these meetings that I've been to. Again, I've heard most of these discussions over and over again. But if we're not going to build a new prison, then what exactly are we going to do? And that's what I haven't heard. I haven't heard what the other options are. And I hope there are other options. Halfway houses, 3/4 houses. We've put in county intermediate punishment. We have more people on house monitors than ever because we have to. We have to. We have opened a day reporting center for those people that we can trust to be out on the street if we just supervise them once a day. We are taking whatever actions we can to minimize the jail population, but there's only so much that we can do. A half, 3/4 house to integrate inmates back into the community, that might be something that would help a little bit, but we're chipping away at a problem that's been ignored for probably 12 years, at least. Just to quote from it again, classification system could be more comprehensive. Yes, it could be, if you had more space and more personnel in that space to classify the inmates. Page 6, kitchen's not designed to handle the amount of meals, daily up to 800. Page 6, due to age of facility and overcrowding, unwanted critters, presumably rats, will be an ongoing issue. Page 7, medical dental area is in one room, cannot accommodate more than one inmate at a time. You have delays in inmate health assessments because there's only one, can only do one inmate at a time, and you have 262 inmates there. The room designated for religious services is very small, and consideration should be given to find a larger area for this and treatment purposes. What larger area are they considering? As far as I know, there isn't one. The facility has outdoor recreation yards. Inmates are not provided with the required 2 hours of recreation per day outdoors, in parentheses, weather permitting. Page 9, paragraph 23. Fayette County Prison offers limited treatment, which appears to only be available through volunteers from the community. And treatment programs are needed if you want to reduce recidivism. That is, you want to rehabilitate inmates so that fewer of them commit new crimes after they're released. Just locking them up does not teach them, is not a civics lesson. It's punishment. It is not restoring them to the ability to stay off drugs, stay off alcohol, stay out of prison again. Page 9, paragraph 27. Due to the age of the facility, it will have routine upkeep. It will have routine upkeep that needs addressed daily. Paragraph F on page 10. With virtually no activities or out of cell time, all the inmates have is time. and it comments about how they destroy the facility because they have nothing else to do. And it concludes basically that treatment programs and activities are needed, and this is not exact quote, but to restore order to the facility. Because if you can't get out of your cell but less than an hour a day, and you have nothing to do with your time, you're not going to do something constructive. You know, again, if there's other options, fine. Let's hear what they are. Let's not just throw the darts at the option that is on the table. And I've heard people say, well, there's got to be another option. I've been wrestling with this for 35 years that I've been involved with criminal justice in Fayette County. And I don't have other options other than what I've mentioned. County Intermediate Punishment, Day Reporting Center, possibly a halfway or three-quarter house to integrate people back into the community. If there's another solution, fine, let's talk about another solution, but let's just not throw darts at the solution that's on the table. Again, I agree this whole thing about 80 out of 142 has diverted attention from the real issue. But the first 10 pages of that exhibit specify all the physical problems with the existing facility.
We just want the truth.
Well, that's the truth as near as I can tell you.
I know, but those are the headlines tomorrow, what you just said, not that jail's going to be shut down. All we want is your honest things spoken from the board.
Let's do this. Let's not focus on one arbitrary statement. There's a wealth of information here that I think is pretty much telling us what direction we need to go in.
Right.
And because there's, you know, I want to be careful here that we don't have, you know, we don't shoot the messenger. You know, Mr. Crabtree is obviously highly respected in his profession as prison design and architecture. He's done a stellar job of presenting the facts to us.
I think we all
Now,
agree with that.
Yes.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, but you know, here's the thing.
And if someone proposed another option, it would be very easy for me to add the cost analysis. Remember,
I think we're
this is all about,
agreement about that.
in my analysis, you know, all of these programs and services, my experience is that goes. Nobody wants to hear about the warm and fuzzy things that we're going to do in this jail. Okay? Everybody wants to know what's it going to cost. And that's the focus of this. I know the benefits to the community from my own experience of all of the things the judge eloquently stated. Okay? Of providing the treatment and services and programs you need. I know that. I have not gone there because that's not the issue that's going to make up your mind.
Well,
The issue that you want to know is what's it going to cost?
no, that's not the issue that
Okay,
I
well
know,
then-
because you've already told me that
Okay.
twice. This is my second meeting.
I recognize it.
And the reason that I raised the issue about closing the prison is simply this. I came to these meetings because they were publicized as public information sessions. And I assumed that I was going to hear the truth. So when I discovered that I had heard some misinformation, I wanted to come back and say that in the hopes that I would hear a response that said, we want you to hear the truth. We're here to give you the truth. And that's all I'm asking, so that I can make up my mind as a taxpayer about what I would like to see happen. That's my only point in being here.
I appreciate that.
And
we
when-
have a lot of other questions we have to
I
answer.
understand that, but one more thing. When a group like this gives out misinformation, it affects your credibility. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Okay.
Please tell us the truth. That's
Are
all
you
I'm
saying
asking.
that I
Not
presented
you,
misinformation?
not you.
Because
No,
all I would want to know is,
specifically
I don't want to
that's
argue it,
my
I want to know what it is that you, so that I can address it.
Only the question I raised about closing the prison.
Okay, let's talk
So let's
about
get
the
on.
truth.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some facts here. This document, anybody's welcome to look at it. It was a needs assessment study that was done in June of 2001 by Carter Goebel Associates Incorporated. Mr. Crabtree knows who they are. They're a very reputable firm. This study done in June of 2001 11 years ago,
Well,
12 years ago. It predicts very accurately the problems we're having today with overcrowding. In 2001, we didn't have any overcrowding problems because the annex was, I think, completed in 1999. So we had 70 inmates in the annex. Now, I think the thing we need to point out here, that the annex was never meant to be a permanent solution. It was a Band-Aid. And so, but in the last 12 years, after, this report was done after the annex was built, and they predicted that the problems we have today, where we're sending 50, 75, 112 inmates to other facilities, other county jail facilities, as far away as State College. We're juggling, typically, on average, between 75 and 100 inmates nearly every month. Now unfortunately, a lot of those inmates aren't sentenced, meaning we have to go get them occasionally, bring them back for hearings or trials. So we have to shuffle these people back and forth, and that's a logistical nightmare for our current prison. Our overtime costs of our existing corrections officers are through the roof because we have to pay them overtime to travel to State College, Indiana, Butler. Where else, Warden?
Cambria,
Cambria. Bedford. Now these aren't hopping a car in 30 minutes you're there. So and those high transportation costs and overtime costs are not included in Mr. Crabtree's report. Only the cost of the rentals themselves. And I can tell you, and the other thing is we have, what's the medical outfit we have? Crime Care. We have them in our prison. They have nurses and they have a doctor. When we send these inmates outside the county, even though we pay a contract price to have that care in our local facility, guess what? We have to pay another doctor or another nurse someplace else to take care of those inmates. So that's more inefficiencies. Keep in mind, folks, sending people outside the county is very costly. And there's multiple ways. We can talk a long time about all the inefficiencies that we haven't had time to talk about here. And as Mr. Crabtree pointed out, our inmate census is going up in the last 5 years by 4.8%. That's a trend that's probably not going to go away. As the judge pointed out, there's a lot of things that we have to do to chip away at the problems, to reduce the increase. We're not going to stop the increase. I want to make that pretty clear. We're not going to stop the increase. The only thing we can do is try to flatten it out a little bit. That increase is going to continue. We've lost 22,000 people out of Fayette County since 1990. You'd think that the increase wouldn't go up. The increased inmate population, you think that wouldn't go up? 22,000 people. We only have 136,600 people here today.
I'd like to follow up on that just for clarity reasons and because people want accurate information. He decided in 2001 report, and he said that the annex was open in 1999. That's incorrect. The annex was opened in the year 2002. It was under the direction of Vacides, Kavanaugh, and Nails. They used $1.2 million of our bond. This was before I was a commissioner as well. And it was a good thing that they did this. They used $1.2 million of our bond, and they built an 80-bed annex. And that was a good thing. but there was also a phase 2 of that. So number one, the 2001 report, he said, was based on 1999 figures. That's absolutely incorrect, and I have the documentation to show it. The bond was issued at the annex was actually opened in the year 2002, 80 bed. That put we needed the 80 beds. But there was also a phase 2 of that. Kimball Associates then had phase 2 that we as commissioners did not implement. And there was actually either 3 or 4 reasons why we did not at the time. Phase 2 was to build a 120-bed facility on site at $6.7 million. It's documented, okay? I've presented that information. It's documented. Anyone can ask me for it. I'll give it to you, okay? Why did we not in the year 2000, either 2006 or 2007, then do the 120-bed facility? Well, there were a couple of reasons. Number one, and should we have probably bite the bullet and done it? But we didn't. And I don't know whether or not we would have been able to have the money for it. The first thing is that the commissioners then, it was Hardy, Basides, Zimmerling, and the prison board was Sheriff Brownfield, D.A. Vernon, Mark Roberts, Controller, and Judge Wagner. There is a prison board minute resolution that I actually made, and it was passed unanimously, that actually said, here we have looked at the statistics, not just the 2001, but the 2004, the 2006, and the 2007 statistics. What should we do? Well, your leaders that you elected made a decision. Right or wrong, that's the decision we made unanimously. And that decision was to implement certain programs. Unfortunate, and we sent it on to the prison board and we sent it on to the CJAB committee. Unfortunately, not all of those recommendations were implemented for a number of reasons. So now let's implement them. They weren't implemented because the inmate population was low. And we thought, well, maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe that crystal ball, maybe that statistics was that, you know, we're off a little. So why spend the $6.7 million? The second thing is that we were just coming out of Hardy and Zimmerling inherited a $3 million deficit. We raised taxes. What financial institution would have lent us $6.7 million to build a prison? I don't think any. There were steps that we could have taken. Some were taken and some were not. Implementing the drug treatment court, the mental health court, the veterans court. They were implemented, they were initiated on paper.
Wait.
But we all know,
What year was that they were implemented?
2007, 2008. It's documented on our county website. Implemented meaning initiated, but not coordinated. It is a well-known fact that our treatment court of the veterans, mental health, and drug was not coordinated. That's why just recently Judge Wagner hired an individual to be the coordinator. Why? Because we needed it. Same way with the Veterans Court. People were slipping through the cracks. We had people with the drug who were in jail that shouldn't have been in jail. So if you get these programs started, okay, and then the day reporting center. Do you know how many people, we just started the day reporting center. $500,000, $400,000, and I'm off, you know, $400,000 from the state, $100,000 from the county. How many people can go into the program for our day treatment center? Found out today from Tim Merlin, the director. We have 26 in that program. That means 26 people aren't in jail and 10 pending. So what we have to do is not just talk about the programs, and not just put them on a piece of paper, but we have to implement them. Because as Mr. Crabtree said, and I'm going to mispronounce the word, it's not a totalitarian thing. It's a couple little things that you have to pull together. It's not just one thing that is going to correct the situation. It's a combination, but you have to pull it all together, and it's ultimately up to the 3 commissioners to do that.
Okay, so is it reasonable to consider tracking these programs and seeing if...
Well, we just started them and we will track them.
Yeah,
Mr.
but-
Merlin will track them in our treatment. You're right,
Well, I
right.
mean, before this decision is made,
Well, that depends on 2 of the 3 commissioners, whoever they may be, to vote on it. I think Ms. Kay has a question.
I pointed out,
Let me point out, first of all, that all these programs that we're putting in place, again, it's not going to reduce the increase in prison population. It's just going to try to level it out some.
right.
You know, maybe over the long term we can get it flattened out, but the fact is, you know, we're hoping to get the population downturn turned around in Fayette County, get more people coming into the county. That's a very important thing, and not too many people understand that. But that's an important effort that we must do. So the fact that we do have a prison overcrowding problem is not going to be solved, you know, by mental health court or a number of the other things. That will help people, which is good. We need to do that. But we're talking about dollars and cents here. As Mr. Crabtree pointed out, if we don't do something with the overcrowding problem, it's going to cost us more. And I can't stress this enough. It's actually going to cost us more than if we would build a new, extremely efficient facility and be able to, you know, get our staffing levels per inmate to an appropriate level to where we can actually save money running the prison. This we just point out here, Mr. Crabtree pointed out, and I point out some of the inefficiencies that we actually haven't included. The picture is really, the economic picture is really a little worse than what Mr. Crabtree has pointed out, simply because he's trying to be very conservative. You know, he doesn't want to cry wolf, but he is pointing out very precise facts and on a very conservative basis. So the fact is, we have to make a decision, and we have to make the best one we can on an economic level, but this problem is complicated. Not so much on the economic side, that's easy. We are in such economic poor condition because we're spending money extremely inefficiently. We're spending money on transportation, out-of-county housing, all those things we already talked about. We can reduce that or eliminate that and run a county jail efficiently and effectively. And, by the way, we can have space in that county jail so we can do some of the programming to help people. We can actually turn people's lives around and get them, we can give them options. One of the problems we have right now, we warehouse our inmates. We keep them in jail.
We heard all this, Mr. Crabtree. Answer some questions and give us some answers that we can.
Look, there's a power game going on that we all want to go and see, and here you're sitting. But you know what I think the biggest question we need to ask here is how are we going to pay for this? Mr. Lally, you tell us how we're going to pay for it and how you can come to that conclusion.
Okay, ma'am. First of all, we already are paying for it as we speak. This year we have $1 million approximately out of county inmate rentals. Our overtime costs, the last time I checked, were $300,000. We have transportation costs in the neighborhood of $45,000. Add all of those numbers up, that's $1.345 million.
Okay, that's all. But it's going to be 30-some million. How about 30-some million?
It's going to be in between
Where's
26
the
and
money coming
31.
from before these savings you're going to have? I want to know where the rest of it's going to come from.
Okay.
And
let's make sure we understand these numbers, okay? These three numbers are the numbers that would replace your current operating budget of your jail. These are not in addition to what you're already spending. These are what you will be spending on your total jail operation and debt service, the total cost of paying for the building every year. Okay? Your budget last year to operate the jail was $5.6 million. It's going to end up that you're going to be $1.5 million over that. That's going to get you to $7 million. If your population goes up, it's going to go up $60 a bed per day, which is tens of thousands of dollars a year for every inmate. Okay? These numbers replace those numbers. You're already spending over $7 million on your jail this year. What we're saying is, including the cost of building it, your budget next year, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, or 10 years from now, in today's dollars, will be $8.3 million. About $1 million more than we know you're already going to spend this year. But what we're also saying is, if you don't do anything, if you don't find a way to house those inmates in your county jail or some other county facility, then you're going to spend $11 million on your jail system in 10 years. Okay? So the important thing is, we're projecting that your jail costs are going up because your inmate count is going up.
Okay, I'm not, you know what?
Does that answer
I'm
that?
not against the building this, I'm not for it, I'm not against it. And I know your mind's made up, we're gonna build it. That's a known fact. In fact, you know, it's in the paper today, you're gonna be voting on it. But what I'm saying is, how are we gonna pay, where is this money, the rest of the money coming from? Now, I know that you have said that it's gonna come from the gambling monies and the Marcellus Shell monies. And what I'm upset about is that money was to lower our property taxes. And now you're taking it to put into this building. And that is upsetting me.
No,
in response to your question,
that's the Marcellus fund, as well as the gaming fund, is not designed pursuant to the statute to reduce property tax. The gaming revenue is designed to go to economic development.
You call this economic development?
If I may finish, please. The Marcellus Act 13 revenue that you referred to is very broad in the interpretation of the statute. I just wanted to clarify that it's not earmarked, i.e. for property tax reduction.
But using that for those purposes is not the best use of the money, especially since we need economic development and uses for Marcellus
It's
Shell.
done in 14 years from now.
And yes.
There's no legislation in upcoming. It's done in 14 years.
Right.
And how long is the bond?
30 years.
30 years. What happens after?
It's 15 years from when it's...
That's what I'm saying, where's this money coming from? I want to know how it's going to affect us as property.
It's not, there's 15.
Yeah, let me address, last year. Let me address the question. If you drill a well today and it's productive, the flat fee that Governor Corbett has established will wind down to where there will be no payments in 15 years. Now, if another well is drilled next year, then that's going to last 1 year longer. And I think it's pretty clear that we're going to continue to drill wells every year as we go forward. And as the market develops, and I'll say this because I know some people know this already, but we are currently building a pipeline across the southern tier of counties in Pennsylvania, from the East Coast to southwestern Pennsylvania. And when that pipeline is completed, a lot of the western Pennsylvania gas is going to be transported to the East Coast. It's going to be liquefied. Put on ships, and the market is going to be Europe, India, and China. Where today's market prices, you could get $8 to $10 a million cubic feet. In this country, we're selling a million cubic feet for about $3 to $4. Okay, so it's over twice as much overseas. So those are market pressures that are going to increase the well drilling in this part of the county.
Then I answer my question, how are we going to pay for this?
That will be a primary source of revenue. ma'am.
Pardon?
The
That will be a
Marcellus
primary
Shell.
source of revenue. The Marcellus Shell, the exploration of gas will be a primary source of revenue to pay for this prison. If you look at Marcellus Shell in the aggregate, we have trillions and trillions of cubic feet of it in this region. That resource is going to get exploited. It is going to be used. It's a simple principle of economics. We have a very large supply. The global demand is larger than the supply. We're not going to run out of revenue from Marcellus Shell. Yes, the legislation expires in 15 years, but is it not plausible that during that 15-year period, if we are truly going to get 10 to 15 dollars per million cubic feet, that revenue stream is going to increase? That's just economic theory. That is going to happen.
The revenue actually decreased from 2011. Well, 2011, we actually counted early revenue from the Marcellus Shell decreased in the last few years that we received the monies. But whether or not somebody wants to have a crystal ball and say gas loans going to be done or we're going to have it, the point is that the best use of the money? We elected 3 commissioners. We have a revenue source of Marcellus Shell. We should be using those monies for the intended purposes of going back into the community, to give them to our township supervisors, to our volunteer fire departments, to things of that nature. We all know what those eight categories are. The best use of that money, in my opinion, but there's 3 of us, okay, in my opinion, is not towards a jail. The same way with the casino revenue. And you are right that the intent of the original legislation was to reduce full property tax. Commissioner Zappa is also right that Harrisburg changed that and said it can be used for other purposes. We all know why they did. The point still is that it falls on the laps of the 3 county commissioners. Now we have the money. What are you going to use it for? And should you not use it for economic development? Mr. Crabtree, rightfully so, said in another presentation that you can keep, there's less crime if people are working, obviously. But if people aren't working if there's no jobs. It's our job as county commissioners to use those monies as economic development to put in infrastructure so that the private community can then come in and create the jobs. If you take those $2 million or $1 million of casino monies and put it towards a jail, then you're not laying the foundation for the economic development. But again, it's up to the 3 county commissioners to decide, him, me, and him, to decide how we are going to pay for it. And it's, will we use the casino revenue? Will we use the Marcellus Shell? You've heard what our opinions are.
Can I have a couple of statements, since I was here as a taxpayer, but since the state issues are coming up. First of all, the casino money that was intended to go to the taxpayers is going to the taxpayers as a reduction on their taxes of $200.
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry.
First of all, the money that was coming from the casinos to go to the homeowners is still going into the homeowners. It was like $200 per home. But the school boards, in their wisdom, raised that tax so it absorbed that. So I feel like I'm in Harrisburg tonight because we have a problem here. And in Harrisburg, everybody wants to kick the can down the road, as I say. In education, in prisons, like Governor Corbett wants to throw it all back onto the counties and make it their problem. But if we don't address this problem as a county in the next 2 to 3 years, tell me how much it's going to cost in the next 8 years to taxpayers of Fayette County.
And that's the part that I'm having a hard time understanding what this debate is all about. Because if you don't do this, and we're worried about how we're going to service the debt on that, and that's $1 million more than you're spending this year, which is $250,000. Is that right, Sean? $250,000. Okay. If you don't do that, you're going to have this. If you don't do something you're going to spend an extra $3 million a year, which is $750,000. That's the part I don't understand why, now we can argue that
Mr. Crabtree, that's my point. That's what's been going on in Fayette County, not for 10 years. It's been going on for 20 years. We've been kicking the can of the problem down the road. The problem's here. And if we don't do something now to address it, 5 years, 10 years from now, our kids are going to really have to see a bump in a tax.
The issue, you're right, no doubt about it. But the issue is that we were told that taxes will not be increased. Okay, that's what we were told. We're talking about truth. Somebody else mentioned that. Okay, but what happens in 15 years? I mean, let's talk about the truth. Maybe we need to pay for this. Maybe we need to bite the bullet and realize we're going to be spending some taxes. Hopefully, this works out and we end up making money off of it. It looks like with those numbers, maybe we're going to be taking some money in individually because of the prison. I mean, I don't know, but
If I may, what was the cost estimated in 2001 for the construction of the new facility?
The
I think it's in the study.
$18 million.
18 million. So to put up the annex, which was a bandage, and that's what it was, a necessary bandage at the time, just to kick it down, push the can down the road. Now we're talking about an increase of 12. I'm sorry? 60%. So again, the reality is we have a facility that was constructed in 1896, folks. None of us were around. It was refurbished in 1962. Clearly, if you would, I welcome you to go take a look at it, to see what type of facility it is. We are faced with a very serious problem. And contrary to what you hear, we are one court ruling away from a disaster. And trust me, the federal courts in their definition of accommodation pursuant to the Americans with Disabilities Act is pretty doggone broad. And I wouldn't want to venture in a courtroom with our ability to provide reasonable accommodation, whether it be to an inmate or to an employee in that facility. Would you not agree with me, Mr. Crabtree?
You're at risk.
But you're comparing apples and oranges because in West Virginia, where those...
I don't know anything about West Virginia.
Okay, but I'm explaining it to you. Moundsville was ordered closed. There was a regional jail system built. I don't know if it was court ordered or not. Perhaps it was. But it was also state money. We're not getting state money.
I wish we would. Tim, I wish we could jump
I
the truck off.
don't understand why we
The fact is, we're not getting it. We're faced with this problem, or we're faced with it today, or we're going to kick it down another 5, 6 years.
Are taxes going to be raised, or are they not going to be raised?
Sir, let me finish, please. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what the future holds. I can tell you, though, that if we do nothing, we're going to put a burden on whether it be our children or our grandchildren. Something's got to be done here.
I agree.
I mean, if we don't do anything, it's going to explode.
Well, why didn't you do it then when it was going to only cost 18?
I wasn't around. That was 2001, Mayor. I can't answer the question in 2001.
Mayor, I don't think anybody in this room, this problem wasn't created by anybody in this room, all 3 commissioners or anybody. This problem was created 15, 20 years ago when something should have been addressed. When you don't let it.
I'm not saying.
And I agree. I think we need to explore all.
We need to solve, and I'm still not getting an answer.
Well, can I ask you a question about the money?
Let me just answer the question. There's been a couple ways. One is some of the savings that we're going to see in the budgets of these 3 years. Okay.
That I understand.
The other way is, yes, we are next year, we are going to get gambling tax revenue. Yes, 50% of that has to be used for economic development as mandated by the state legislature. Thank God, because we need it. We desperately need economic development funds in this county. But that leaves the other half we can apply toward toward the prison debt, and obviously the Marcellus Shell funding is another source. With those, combination of those three, we won't have to raise taxes. We have to be intelligent about where we go in the future. If we don't, if we don't make this decision now, then we're going to have to raise taxes $750,000, not 10 years from now, 2 years from now. And those are fundamentally the economic decisions. It's not really complicated.
That sounds good. I hope I'm around to question it later.
Yes, I hope you are too, Mayor.
So you're going to take out a bond, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and you're going to use general fund. Right, so I'm saying
A bond would be the obvious approach.
you're going to utilize already existing actual dollars in the budget, right? Plus what?
I don't understand.
Currently, Mr. Michael, currently our prison budget is 5.5, I'm rounding here, $5.6 million, which equates to about 29% of our overall budget. Yes, you are right. We will include that as a part of the debt service, along with whatever means of financing we would opt for, bond,
And that's how
lottery,
you're budgeting.
whatever. Yeah.
And Commissioner, that's how you're going to budget to pay for the prison.
Affirmative.
Thanks.
But you're over 1.345 this year. As of this budget. And if the trend keeps going like Mr. Crabtree says, the 2.4 at a lower rate, not the 4 point whatever, your beds out of the county are going to rise, right?
I believe that your cost of operating the prison next year will be between $2 and $2.4 million more than your $5.6 million budget, which is approximately the same number.
So it's about $8
as
million.
what I'm telling you a new facility will cost. Do we get that?
I understand dollars and cents.
You have to fund another $1 million from somewhere. Marcellus Shale, something, to operate your prisons. Now, do you want to fund that other $1 million to operate your prisons by paying somebody else? Or do you want to fund it the same amount of dollars to solve your problem now for the next 10 years? That's the question you're taking.
Since we're running close to time, is there any other questions from the public? Because it's like, what, 8:20, unless that clock's wrong?
Someplace else. I mean, Reserve Center, Ames, like in the paper, that wasn't an option, that wasn't zero understood.
Which side?
Someplace else.
Well, the Reserve Center actually was the very first one.
Mine is a hypothetical site with $3.5 million worth of site work, okay? Doesn't matter where you put it. Doesn't matter where you put it. A different committee has been evaluating the sites. I want to make sure, I didn't put it on a site.
Actually, ma'am, there were 18 sites that were actually looked at. The very first one was the Army Reserve Center. Because of cost and the need to build a multiple-story building to accommodate our actual need, it was ruled out. In addition to that, it had about a 2-year turnaround before we could even get a decision from the agencies that were involved in that. So
Agencies involved are taxpayers.
It required the General Services Administration, ma'am, which is an agency of the federal government, along with the Department of Defense, would have had to approve the dual purchase or the giveaway of the facility. I'll give you an example. The old federal building downtown, the county got that back when I was working for Congressman Mascara. One of the stipulations was that they had to utilize it for juvenile programs. So currently we house our juvenile probation office there, correct? And that was one of the stipulations behind the transfer or the deed being given to the county at that time.
an important thing to consider there, ma'am. There was no real opportunity for expansion. Once that prison would be built, let's say in 15, 20 years, there may be to amend the petition, there's no way to vote. It's just out of the question. That's why that's like unchosen.
I'm going to pay a county fair. Just answer my question. How you met with Bill Jackson, whenever this all started? His first name's Randy Breaker. You mentioned 20 acres of leaving existing tree line. Existing tree line doesn't mean, because I got the ordinance, I got the deed and everything right in front of me. That means leaving what's already there, not building a buffer zone or anything like that. You started out at 20 acres, now you're starting 30, and this gentleman right here says there's no room for expansion. It's all one. Excuse me, let me speak. You talked about health and safety for people that's killed people, molested people, and everything else. We've got an organization out there that funds herself. The county, and thank you for what you do for us. I won't knock you down for that, and all the commissioners. But on the flip side, you got roughly $100,000. If you read in the paper today, we had our annual fair meeting. You're going to put them people in jeopardy out there every day. We got a staff out there that's out there all the time. If you look at the deed right here, it says 77 acres. There's actually 77.3 acres. You're going to take 30 acres. That leaves us 47 acres. Ed and I, we both sit on the building and grounds, and you'll be in our parking lot, right in our back door, and the first people that's going to get hit is the 4-H horse kids, and we got some people sitting on the board here that their kids are showing there. You talk about a jail. If you read on my card, it says, is it going to be called a jail, or is it going to be called the Hall of Justice Rehabilitation Center? Yes or no?
We've not decided on a, we've looked at various things for the new facility, and that's one of the suggestions, the Hall of Justice and Rehabilitation Center, simply because that describes more to people what this facility is really going to be instead of just a county jail. County jail is not very descriptive.
But it has, go ahead.
But the effort here is to help people. You know, there's a, now keep in mind, I just want to make sure everybody understands, the people that are sentenced into this facility are serving less than 24 months. Anybody who is sentenced over 24 months goes to a state facility. And sometimes, Your Honor, if I speak here, sometimes they actually go to a federal facility, depending on crimes, but most of the time they go to a state facility.
If it's a state crime, it goes to either the county or the state prison. There are some crimes that are both state and federal crimes. Usually, if they're easy convictions, then the federal government will take them over to treat it as a federal crime, which is fine. It takes some pressure off of us.
So the bottom line here is that those individuals that are sentenced for less than 24 months are typically, petty theft, drug and alcohol abuse, DUIs, small crimes, things that you can actually help those people turn their lives around. Give them options that they can, give them counseling, education, training. And especially a lot of people that have mental health issues, unless you counsel them and maybe help them with some medications or whatever, they're not going to know how to change their lives. So the rehabilitation programming that we're developing and have developed to work inside the walls of this facility, and then, to start it there, and then if the court system allows them some alternative sentencing, so they go out into the day reporting program, they've already started the process, the counseling, the training, the education, and that transition from inside the walls of that prison to when they get to go home, they continue that process. So the success rate will be much, much better than it is. I talked to the new the new chancellor, Penn State, Arlene Hall, and Joe Sigilia, who is the program director out there. You know, we'll be able, with the new facility, we'll be able to do some develop internships, not only for the criminal justice system at Penn State, but also for you know, the psychological counseling. Now, one of the other things, and that helps the kids, you know, that are going to school here in Fayette County, potentially get involved in careers that they can stay here in Fayette County. The other thing I want to point out, the $1 million that we're sending outside the county, we're paying corrections officers in other jails. Why are we doing that? Why don't we pay our own corrections officers that raise their families right here in Fayette County, keep that money here in Fayette County to buy products here in Fayette County? You know, once that money goes outside of Fayette County, it never comes back.
But you didn't answer my question. You said you had 18 sites. If you see on my card, in 08, Joe Hardy went to the tax assessment office and did his homework. How many guys did you hire to go around looking at these 18 sites? Or how many guys went? Did the commissioners go, or did the gentleman that just left here?
No, what
did he just go?
No,
It was a combination of
here's what
a lot
we
of
did.
us. Actually.
But you got 18 sites, and you picked the Fayette County Fairgrounds?
Well, you know what?
Yeah,
I was something to bring up on that too. I can't understand, now, in the paper, it keeps saying, you know, it's county-owned property, and I don't dispute that. But the Fayette County Fair has a lease on that property until 2050. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe you're right.
No, is
No,
it correct? Not believing, because
It is correct.
It is 2050. We've done our homework here now.
I was thinking.
But why would
2052,
you
but
choose a
said-
property that's under lease, especially by a fairgrounds? And you've got a school on one side, you've got the fairgrounds, and you've got a church, all right in that vicinity right.
Excuse me, I work a half block from the jail. I have worked in downtown Uniontown since 1966. I have never had a problem. I feel sorry for the people standing outside. There are times that there are like 25, 30 people standing there in the rain, in the snow, with little kids, waiting to visit in that prison, and there is nowhere for them to stand. Those are the people I feel sorry for.
So you put up a $10,000 overhang, Denise.
Well, why hasn't anybody done that? Why have I looked at those people
I'll
standing
tell you why.
outside?
It's been in the budget, but the
Irregardless
requisitions
of
come through.
that.
But that has nothing to do with this
There is
one.
no problem with being next
But when
to
you have
the prison.
18 sites in the town, I can't
Answer-
understand that
answer
there
me
would
that
not be
question.
one more feasible site.
Sir, I'm sorry.
Why the Fayette County Fair whenever you had 18 sites, and you're telling me that there was multitudes of people that went and looked at it?
I'm not saying
Well,
multitudes,
let me
I'm
answer the
saying
question.
that there were several people.
Let me answer that question. First of all, we started this, I'm going to take a little bit of a long way, but I'll make it short. You know, we started this process over a year ago. We acquired, we volunteered, or we asked for volunteers for a number of people from the county employees, and the general public who wanted to get involved in this process. We called ourselves the Prison Working Group. Nothing more than an extension of the Prison Working Board, or the Prison Board. Because I'm sure you know, if you want to accomplish anything, the more people that you have with some knowledge and expertise, gets to your goals and objectives a lot quicker. The people that we asked as the architectural team was Faye Penn, because if there's anybody that knows what properties are available around the county, Faye Penn, our Economic Development Council, would know. We also asked the Fayette County Redevelopment Authority. There are also some people who knows around the county, what properties could be available. They provided us with a number of properties. In addition, once we had our prison working group meeting and talked about looking for sites, that made it in paper. So then there was some additional individuals with property that contacted us and say, hey, yeah, I have some property here or there, I'd be interested in you purchasing it. So we looked at all these various sites. We looked at utility access. We looked at housing in the neighborhood. Potential ground conditions. Some of the property was stripped, coal stripped in the past, which would present some concerns. So we looked at all this, as Controller Lally already pointed out, we looked at the Reserve Center. In the process of evaluating all those properties, when you looked at the cost, the availability of the utilities, who was living around there, because you don't want to build a jail a block away from a daycare center, which the current jail is a block away from a daycare center. I don't know if that stopped any parents from bringing their kids there, but this facility, the cost profile overall, selected the lower section of the fairground property as the best possibility.
Well, you also have a stone quarry right there. They're blasting, they're hauling stone out of there continually. How is that going to affect this new building?
Why would you
I'm
consider
pretty
that
sure
property
the
as a
stone quarry
lease?
doesn't mind.
Well, and just like he said, when you have a lease on a property, why would you consider that
Why was
property
that
breaking
never,
that lease?
why was that never
It was never brought up
ever?
Never brought up. And one other thing is, you're talking about the development of a jail, of whatever you want to call it. You've just cut our throats. We can't grow no more at the fair. We are done. Agriculture, boys and girls, if you've looked lately, is the #1 industry. It's the only #1 industry that's used every second of every minute of every hour of every day by everybody. The only industry. And you've just cut our throats. Because we can't grow at the fair.
Where
no
you're
more.
at, where you're going to be, right now, Randy and I chair the parking committee. We get down to the last parking place on that fairgrounds when we have the fair. I mean, to the last parking place. And I know you've probably never been there, maybe a lot of these other people.
I'll tell you one commissioner who has is Miss Angela Zimmerman.
Well,
And I thank you.
Here's the thing.
And now you're going to take that away from us. And just remember, the Fayette County Fair is the biggest event in Fayette County. Remember that. And it's not just the fair.
It's
Right here is the calendars for every month of the year. Okay? Every week, there's all kind of activities. Most of them are youth activities on that fair. You're going to have this prison within, what? 200 yards of a 4-H horse show arena where they have an event at least 5 times a month.
And Commissioner, it says on here, Fayette County zoning ordinance. A correctional facility shall have a minimum lot area of 150 acres, if you care to look at
That doesn't refer to a county jail. I mean, we'd have to.
Oh, so this don't apply to the Fayette County zone. I mean, we have to.
It's Fayette County ordinance that.
That's what it says right here, if I'm reading it correctly.
It's called.
And it
Fayette
says
County zoning
1,000 feet from an existing school, and you have right here.
We're outside of that 1,000 feet.
Let's mark there 1,000 feet.
But even getting away from all that, why would you choose a property that's already leased through 2050?
Let's bring it
Because you own the property and it's cheap. Is that correct?
It's free. Well, that's one of the elements of it.
Oh, sure.
Well, that's
Sure.
one of the things that actually
The other-
I did not know, and thank you for bringing that up, that there is a lease agreement. I knew there was a lease agreement
Yes,
between
ma'am.
the county, and I didn't realize that it extended to year,
2050. Yes.
And does that include the entire 77.33
Yes, ma'am.
acres? Of
Yes,
which
ma'am.
the county commissioners on Tuesday may take 20 to 30 acres?
Well, at first they started at 20, now they're starting 30. Finally up here, he says for room for expansion.
Going back to see.
Yes.
Sir, I never said that I was taking
So
30
we
acres.
can't just
of
vote
that.
on it on
It was in the
Tuesday
paper this
because we
morning.
have to go back, we have other
Well, whoever said it, it was in the paper this morning. Now, it started out with 12 acres, then it went to 20, now it's up to 30.
It was in the paper because.
But I'm
it was
telling
said-
you, you're going to cripple the Fayette County Fair. In more ways than one.
And we want to talk
Mr.
about
Crabtree,
revenue.
what does the footprint of the current facility take up in acreage?
The existing facility?
No, the facility that we're planning on, if we do
The
that.
hypothetical box that we drew around it is 13 acres.
Yes. Now, like I said, you were quoted in the paper saying 20. In today's paper, and I didn't see who quoted, but it said 30 acres.
It said 20 to 30.
Mr.
That's what
Crawford
the
saying
agenda
13, is
item
that
No,
what it
we
says?
have currently
That's the box
77
that you saw in that
acres.
drawing was a 13
We've been
acre.
expanding that for the last, 8 years now?
Yes,
We've
sir.
been expanding for more parking. We just completed one more parking lot. And this year, there was probably 7 out of the 10 days, we couldn't put another car in that parking lot.
Well, to clear that up, regardless of what the newspaper, excuse me, Commissioner Anderson, regardless of what the newspaper says, the agenda item does say 20 to 30 acres, okay? So someone gave, one of us three, and it wasn't me, okay, placed that on the agenda, 20 to 30 acres. They didn't just, they certainly didn't get it from the Herald-Standard or the Trib. We made that amount up. And then also, the next item is to subdivide 77.33 acres of that, which would be the 20 to 30. So there's no dispute, because that is what the three of us advanced to the Tuesday commissioners meeting to approve 20 to 30 acres and then to approve the subdivision.
Well, Mr. Lally just made a statement a few minutes ago that, future development.
Well, that's future development will be within.
The footprint that is shown on that drawing is 13 acres. It includes essentially tripling the bed capacity of the jail, which should last you 50 years.
But it's still taking 20 to 30 acres of the.
Exactly.
No, it's not. No, I'm sorry. It's 13 acres is what's on that drawing. I think the 20 to 30 acres comes from where it makes common sense to draw a line between all of the property that they've looked at is beyond the power lines, down the hill from the power lines. Okay, so that you understand.
Well, our parking goes.
Okay, I'm just
Here,
make sure we're all talking about
map
the
right
same.
here, I'll show you.
Yeah, I've seen the aerial photographs. I understand.
Okay, right there is the hill where the power line. Okay, we park all the way to here.
Well, what we can actually do,
I think we need to get it surveyed.
well, that's fine, but what we can do is we can build additional parking spaces.
Where?
We have no more than that.
There's nowhere else to go. We've got everything opened up with that one little corner right there.
You have a choice. The fairgrounds has no choice.
Well, there's, what about this extra property here?
This property right here, we just finished opening this up right here. And we put our gravel road at this. We've got this one little corner right here, and this is a drop off.
There's wet nails.
Yes. Yeah, there's a creek runs right down through there. No.
So maybe it's just my missing.
What's involved
So
with
right
amending
here's the
the
hill
county
with power
needs?
line. We
What's
park
involved with amending the county needs?
right here.
The lessees want to sit down there and eat.
And you know what? It just kind of makes me mad
they
that no one has ever
don't want
got
to-
this committee together and
Or
came out there.
amend their lease?
Well,
Then-
let's back up a minute.
I didn't. Go ahead.
I talked to Bill Jackson Munster, and I told him about this possibility. And I told him at that time, I'd be more than happy to come and speak to your board, the fairgrounds board. And he said, well, he's too busy right now with the fair, so after the fair. Well, I called him I talked to him Monday night. I said, and that's why he made the announcement at the dinner the other night. But I'll be more than happy to come and talk to the.
Better do it before Tuesday when the three commissioners.
Well, I'll say that,
That's
if you
fine.
want to do it Saturday or Sunday, we get them boys down, we can meet. And I'd like all three commissioners to be there, so we can sit down.
How many people are on your board?
There says 12, well, there's 13, one from the extension office, yes, sir.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why did, I don't know the structure of the fair. I have been to the fair many times. I grew up on 80 Acres Road, so the assumption that I haven't been there, I have been there many, many times, taking my kids. Who is the president of your board? Is it Bill Jackson?
Bill Jackson.
Okay. Commissioner Ambersini did speak with him.
And we know that.
Okay, and Mr. Custer just told me that there was no opposition when he spoke to your organization about this. It was listed in today's paper. I don't know. I don't know the story. I'm just.
And I don't know, Jim.
No, I don't
I
either.
wasn't invited.
All I know is I read in the paper
Yeah.
today, Bill Jackson saying he had no opposition.
He had, you're exactly right, and that upsets me, whether he's here or not.
It sounds like there needs to be an evaluation of parking situation at the fairground.
Obviously, the parking situation can be made more efficient. You know, there's probably some things we can do to prepare ground that is not down over the hill for additional parking.
Well, let me ask you this, before we sit here and say if, and, buts, or wars, there's a lot of if, and, buts, or wars. When are you boys, well, men and ladies, available this weekend?
Yes.
To come out there and look at the facilities instead of us guessing at the facilities? You know what I'm talking about? I mean,
You know, I don't want to, I just want to mention that, another thing, and I asked Mr. Jackson if there was ever going to be any development down over the hill in that area, and he said, no.
Well, no.
Now, I don't know.
Where he's referring to is the one place I was telling you where it's a
In the
drop
wetlands
off,
down
and
there.
there's a creek runs through there. We can't go any further that way. We can't.
No, but I mean where the potential site is.
Yeah, but we don't even know exactly where that potential site
Would it
is.
not be, I don't mean to interrupt, but only because it's 10 till 9, okay? But would it not be a good idea, as Mr. Drake just said, to have the commissioners and the fair board get together and sit down and talk? I'll make myself available between now and Tuesday at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
well, do you want to have them, you just tell us, we'll be there.
Well, I'll have to, you know, we'll have to get Mr. Jackson to set it up. You know, in terms of,
Well, I'll call him
because
tonight.
he's the chairman.
Yeah, and I talked with him today, and he said, if you guys want to get things lined up, so
I'll call.
you call him.
We'll set something up.
Yes.
Before Tuesday. Mr. Breaker, will your entire board be meeting?
Well, ma'am, I can't tell you that, but I'll sure be there.
We'll have as many as we
Well,
can.
we're gonna have to advertise that as a special meeting.
No,
We can call it.
We can call. Yes. And I appreciate it.
And I request that we allow Mr. Crabtree and Mr. Zimmerman to leave since they have a 3+ hour drive.
Yeah, they need to go home.
Thank you, Mr. Crabtree.
I don't want you to leave, but.
I just want to start by saying you folks have had a very good airing and a very good process. It's healthy. I'm happy to see it. So good luck with your decision, and I'm available to do whatever you need.
Thank you.
There needs to be evaluation of your